Hello, history learners! I'm here to share fascinating stories from history in an audio format, perfect for listening while doing chores, studying, or just relaxing with something interesting in the background. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider subscribing for more history content like this. Without further ado, let's travel back to the early days of professional baseball and uncover the bizarre, hilarious, and often unbelievable life of Rube Waddell, the Hall of Fame pitcher who dominated Major League Baseball while somehow becoming one of the strangest and most unpredictable athletes in sports history. Rube Waddell was one of the best baseball pitchers in the world in the early 1900s, but he became famous for reasons that had almost nothing to do with baseball. His real name was George Edward Waddell. He was born in Pennsylvania in 1876 and started playing professional baseball in the 1890s, when the sport was still chaotic and loosely organized compared to today. Teams traveled constantly, players drank heavily, contracts were unreliable, and sports journalism was full of exaggeration and colorful storytelling. Even in that environment, Waddell stood out as unusually unpredictable. On the field, he was dominant. He was a left-handed pitcher with incredible strikeout ability at a time when strikeouts were much less common than they are today. Between 1902 and 1907, he led the American League in strikeouts 6 consecutive seasons. Hitters considered him almost impossible to face when he was focused. He eventually became so respected as a player that he was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame decades after his death. The problem was that staying focused was difficult for him. Stories about Waddell spread throughout baseball because he constantly behaved in ways that made no sense to teammates, managers, or reporters. One of the most famous stories claimed that he left games to go fishing. Historians are not certain whether he literally walked off during an official Major League game, but there is little doubt that he frequently disappeared, skipped responsibilities, and wandered away from the team whenever something else interested him more. Another famous story involved fire trucks. According to teammates and newspaper reports from the time, Waddell was fascinated by fire engines and would chase after them when he heard alarms in the street. Several accounts describe him becoming distracted during games if fire bells rang nearby. Over time, the stories became more dramatic, with some versions claiming he actually ran off the field during games to follow fire wagons. The exact details are hard to verify now, but historians generally believe the obsession itself was real. He also developed a reputation for disappearing entirely during the off-season. In one particularly famous case, people reportedly could not find him for weeks until it was discovered that he had joined a circus or carnival attraction and was wrestling alligators. Like many stories about Waddell, the details may have grown larger in the retelling, but there is evidence that he genuinely participated in traveling shows and bizarre side jobs during the winter months. His behavior frustrated managers constantly. The person most associated with trying to control him was Connie Mack, manager of the Philadelphia Athletics. Mack was known as calm, disciplined, and intelligent, but even he struggled to manage Waddell. He fined him repeatedly, suspended him, and tried different ways of motivating him, but nothing worked consistently. Waddell also had serious problems with alcohol. Drinking was common in baseball during that period, but his reputation became especially bad. Sports writers nicknamed him Southpaw, combining the baseball term southpaw for a left-handed pitcher with souse, meaning drunk. At the same time, many people found him genuinely likable. He behaved more like an impulsive child than a traditional sports star. There are stories that opposing fans could distract him by showing him puppies near the dugout because he would wander over to pet them. Historians are less certain about this particular story, but people who knew him consistently described him as extremely distractible and easily fascinated by random things happening around him. Some modern writers have speculated that Waddell may have had ADHD, autism spectrum traits, or another neurological condition that people in his era did not understand. Others believe alcoholism and emotional immaturity explain most of his behavior. Since he lived more than a century ago, there is no way to know for certain. What is clear is that nearly everyone around him agreed that he behaved very differently from other players. Despite all of this, he remained one of the biggest stars in baseball for several years. Fans loved watching him because nobody knew what might happen next. He could strike out entire lineups, argue with spectators, wander away from the team, or suddenly become distracted by something unrelated to the game. Late in his life, his health deteriorated badly. In 1912, severe flooding hit parts of Kentucky, and, according to several accounts, Waddell helped with rescue efforts for flood victims. Soon afterward, he became seriously ill with pneumonia, and his condition worsened over time. Alcoholism and other health problems likely contributed to his decline. He died in 1914 at only 37 years old. More than a century later, Rube Waddell remains one of the strangest figures in sports history because the combination seems almost impossible. He was both an elite athlete and a person who appeared unable or unwilling to function within normal professional expectations. Many eccentric athletes become famous despite mediocre performance. Waddell was different because he was genuinely one of the greatest pitchers of his era, while simultaneously behaving in ways that sounded fictional even to people who played beside him. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this journey into history. Be sure to come back tomorrow for another fascinating story from the past. And if there's a historical topic you'd like to hear about, feel free to leave a suggestion in the comments. Your ideas might inspire a future episode.